The crystalline ceiling of the Grand Harmony Hall refracted light into dancing patterns across the assembled dignitaries. Princess Zelara of Vinder swept through the arched entrance, her iridescent silver gown trailing behind her like liquid moonlight. Her skin shimmered with a natural luminescence, marking her as royalty among the Vendoran people. Two curved horns rose elegantly from her temples, adorned with chains of star sapphires that chimed softly with each movement. Behind her, Mistela hurried to keep pace. The young attendant's plain robes and single horn marked her as common-born, but her loyalty to the princess was absolute. She carried a tablet displaying the evening's schedule, though she knew Zelara would ignore most of it. "Your Highness, the opening ceremony begins in 20 minutes, Mistela whispered, her voice anxious. "Your mother, the Queen, expects you to greet the primary delegations." Zelara waved a dismissive hand, her attention caught by the elaborate ice sculptures decorating the hall. Each one represented a different world in the Alliance, frozen monuments to supposed unity. She found them tedious. This entire summit was tedious. 3 weeks of diplomatic niceties, endless banquets, and carefully rehearsed speeches about cooperation and peace. "Tell me again why we must entertain every minor species in the galaxy," Zelara said, examining her reflection in a polished pillar. She adjusted one of the sapphire chains, ensuring it caught the light properly. "Surely our time would be better spent with civilizations that actually matter." Mistela's lavender eyes widened with concern. She glanced around nervously, ensuring no one had overheard. "Princess, please. Your mother has stressed the importance of this summit. After the recent conflicts are precisely why this is pointless," Zelara interrupted. She turned from her reflection, scanning the growing crowd with barely concealed boredom. Delegates from dozens of worlds mingled beneath the vaulted ceiling. Some had scales, others feathers, still others forms that defied easy categorization. Everyone smiles and shakes hands or tentacles, or whatever appendages they possess, while secretly plotting advantage. "It's theater." A group of young nobles from the crystalline courts approached, bowing formally. Zelara acknowledged them with a slight nod, allowing them to join her entourage. They fell into easy conversation, discussing the latest fashions from the core worlds and gossiping about which delegates had arrived with the most impressive retinues. "Have you seen the Theraxian ambassador?" One noble, a thin male named Verix, asked with barely suppressed laughter. "His ceremonial armor is at least 3 centuries out of style. I suppose when your species lives for 500 years, fashion becomes rather ... flexible." The group tittered appreciatively. Zelara smiled, enjoying the cattiness. This was more interesting than another boring lecture about diplomatic protocol. "Oh, but that's nothing," another noble chimed in. The Meridian delegation brought only 2 attendants. 2. As if they're merchants rather than representatives of an entire star system. Zelara was about to add her own observation when movement near the hall's eastern entrance caught her attention. A new group had arrived, and something about them made her pause. They were humanoid in shape, but their appearance was remarkably plain compared to the exotic beings surrounding them. "Who are they?" she asked, gesturing toward the newcomers. Mistela consulted her tablet quickly. "The human delegation from Earth, Your Highness. This is their first attendance at a grand summit. They were recently granted provisional membership in the Alliance." "Earth?" Zalara's tone dripped with amusement. "That backwater planet on the edge of the outer rim? The one that only achieved interstellar travel 50 years ago?" The humans numbered 6, all dressed in matching dark suits that seemed almost aggressively simple. No flowing robes, no ceremonial armor, no bioluminescent displays, just plain fabric and restrained colors. At the front of their group stood a man who appeared to be in his early 30s, with dark hair and a strong jawline. His eyes were a striking green, currently surveying the hall with quiet intensity. "Look at them," Zalara said, her voice rising slightly to ensure others nearby could hear. "They dress like mourners at a funeral. Where is the pageantry? The celebration of culture? Do they not understand this is a grand summit?" Varric snickered. "Perhaps that is their culture, Your Highness. Drabness and simplicity." The group around Zalara laughed, and she felt a surge of satisfaction. She was entertaining them, being clever. Other young delegates had begun to notice, drifting closer to see what was causing the amusement. "Their planet isn't even beautiful," Zalara continued, warming to her subject. "I've seen the scans. Mostly water, chaotic weather patterns, and they've barely colonized their own solar system. They're children playing at galactic politics." Mistela touched her arm gently. "Your Highness, perhaps nothing," Zalara said, shaking off the warning. She felt bold now, energized by the attention. "I think I should welcome them properly. It's only polite, after all." Before Mistela could protest further, Zalara began walking toward the human delegation. Her entourage followed, and behind them, a wake of curious onlookers. The crystalline floor chimed softly beneath their feet, announcing their approach. The humans noticed. The man at the front, Zalara assumed he was their leader, turned to face her. His expression remained neutral, professional. He didn't bow or show deference, simply stood waiting with his hands clasped loosely in front of him. Zalara stopped a few feet away, close enough to make her scrutiny obvious. She let her eyes travel deliberately over the humans, taking in every detail with exaggerated interest. Up close, they seemed even more unremarkable. No horns, no luminescence, no natural weapons or armor. Their skin was a variety of earth tones, completely matte and ordinary. "Welcome," Zalara said, infusing the word with just enough irony to make her true meaning clear. "How quaint to have you join us. Tell me, is this truly your formal attire, or did you mistake this for a business conference?" A few titters came from the crowd behind her. The human leader's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly, but he didn't respond. His eyes remained steady, meeting her gaze directly. Something about that direct look made Zalara uncomfortable, though she couldn't say why. "What's wrong?" She pressed. "Don't you speak? Or do humans lack the capacity for proper diplomatic discourse?" She turned to address the growing audience. "Perhaps their translators are malfunctioning. Should we speak more slowly?" More laughter, louder now. Zalara felt herself feeding off it, becoming bolder. She circled the human delegation slowly, like a predator assessing prey. The man tracked her movement with his eyes, but didn't turn his body. His companions remained equally still, equally silent. "And these outfits," Zalara continued, reaching out as if to touch the fabric of the leader's jacket, but stopping just short. "So plain, so lacking in artistry. Do humans not understand beauty? Or is this deliberate a statement that your culture values mediocrity?" The hall had grown quiet now. Even the older diplomats had stopped their conversations to watch. Zalara noticed Ambassador Joran, a respected elder from the Seraphim Collective, frowning deeply. But she was too caught up in the moment to care. "I'm curious," she said, facing the human leader directly again. "What exactly does Earth bring to this alliance? Advanced technology? No, you're centuries behind most of us. Military might? Doubtful, given your planet has barely stopped warring among itself. Cultural achievements?" She gestured at their simple attire. "Clearly not." The human's green eyes never wavered. There was something in them now, a depth that Zalara couldn't quite read. Not anger, exactly. Something older, something harder. For just a moment, she felt a flicker of uncertainty. "Your name?" she demanded suddenly. "What are you called, Silent One?" A pause. Then, in a voice that was quiet but carried clearly through the hall, "Marcus Webb, Your Highness. I lead the Earth delegation." His accent was strange, his vowels shaped differently than the common galactic tongue. But his words were perfectly clear, perfectly pronounced. He had understood everything she'd said. He had simply chosen not to respond until now. "Marcus Webb," Zalara repeated, making the name sound foreign and awkward. "And tell me, Marcus Webb of Earth, do you always stand mute while others speak? Or is this special restraint reserved for those you consider your betters?" Something flickered across Marcus's face there, and gone in an instant. Behind him, one of his companions, a younger man with blond hair, shifted his weight. His hands had curled into fists. Marcus's hand moved slightly, a tiny gesture that the younger man seemed to understand. He froze, visibly forcing himself to relax. The small exchange fascinated Zalara despite herself. Such control, such discipline. Almost military in its precision. But that only made them seem more rigid, more lifeless. "Nothing to say?" She pressed. "No defense of your world? Your people? Do you simply accept that you're out of your depth here?" "Your Highness." The voice cut through the hall, like a blade through silk. Cold, commanding. Absolute dot, every head in the room turned. The crowd near the eastern entrance parted immediately, people scrambling to move aside. Through the gap walked Queen Thesa, and the temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Zalara felt her blood freeze in her veins. Her mother wore full ceremonial armor, something she only did for the most formal occasions, or when making a point of great importance. The silver and blue metal plates seemed to glow with their own light, etched with the names of Vinder's greatest heroes. The Queen's face was a mask of controlled fury, her luminescence pulsing with barely contained emotion. "Mother, Zalara began." But the look in Queen Thesa's eyes silenced her immediately. The Queen approached with measured steps, each one ringing with authority. She stopped between Zalara and Marcus, and for a long moment she simply looked at her daughter. The disappointment in her eyes was crushing. When she finally spoke, her voice was soft but carried to every corner of the silent hall. "Do you know who this man is, Zalara?" Zalara's mouth went dry. She shook her head mutely. Queen Thesa turned to Marcus Webb. She met his eyes, and something passed between them, recognition, respect, shared memory. Then, slowly and deliberately, the Queen of Vinder bowed her head to the human dot. The hall erupted in gasps and whispers. A sovereign bowing to anyone was unprecedented. Bowing to a representative of a minor world was incomprehensible. Zalara felt the world tilt beneath her feet. Her mother straightened and looked at her once more. "This man," Queen Thesa said, her voice ringing with steel, "saved my life." The silence that followed Queen Thesa's words was absolute. Princess Zalara felt as though the crystalline floor had turned to ice beneath her feet, threatening to crack and swallow her whole. Around her, the assembled dignitaries stood frozen, their expressions ranging from shock to fascination to carefully concealed satisfaction at witnessing a royal humiliation. "Saved your life?" Zalara heard herself whisper, though the words seemed to come from very far away. Queen Thesa's luminescence pulsed brighter, a sign of intense emotion that every Vindoran recognized. She gestured sharply toward the private corridors that led from the Grand Hall. "We will discuss this in private. Now." It wasn't a request. Zalara glanced desperately at Nastila, seeking some form of support or escape, but her attendant had gone pale and could barely meet her eyes. The other young nobles who had been so eager to laugh at her jokes moments ago had melted back into the crowd, suddenly fascinated by the ice sculptures or their own shoes. "Ambassador Joran," Queen Thesa called without turning. The elderly Seraphim diplomat stepped forward immediately. Please ensure the human delegation is shown every courtesy. Private quarters, access to all diplomatic facilities, and my personal apology for this disgraceful display." "Of course, Your Majesty," Joran replied, his multiple eyes blinking in solemn acknowledgement. Queen Thisa finally looked at Marcus Webb again. Her expression softened almost imperceptibly. "We will speak later, Marcus. There is much to discuss beyond this unfortunate incident." Marcus bowed his head slightly, a gesture of respect without submission. "Of course, Your Majesty. We came here to build bridges, not burn them." His words were diplomatic, but Zalara caught something underneath them, a quiet strength, perhaps even forgiveness. It made her feel smaller somehow, more ashamed than her mother's fury had. The queen turned and walked toward the private corridors, her armor chiming with each step. Zalara had no choice but to follow, feeling the weight of hundreds of eyes upon her back. Behind her, she heard the hall slowly coming back to life, whispers spreading like wildfire through the assembled crowd. The corridor seemed to stretch endlessly. Zalara walked 3 paces behind her mother, as protocol demanded, but the distance felt like a chasm. They passed through 2 security checkpoints, where guards bowed deeply to the queen but pointedly avoided looking at Zalara. Finally, they entered a private receiving room, its walls adorned with tapestries depicting Vinder's 1,000-year history. The moment the door sealed behind them, Queen Thisa whirled on her daughter. "Explain yourself." Zalara opened her mouth, then closed it. What could she say? That she had been bored? That she had wanted to entertain her friends? That she had never considered the humans might actually matter? Every excuse that came to mind sounded pathetic even to her own ears. I didn't know. That much is painfully obvious," Queen Thisa interrupted. Her voice was sharp enough to cut. "You didn't know because you never bothered to learn. You saw beings you deemed beneath you and decided they were acceptable targets for your amusement." "Everyone else was thinking it too," Zalara protested weakly. "The way they dress, their lack of enough." The word cracked like thunder. Queen Thisa's horns seemed to glow brighter, casting sharp shadows across the tapestries. "Do you think leadership is about saying what everyone else is thinking? Do you believe being royal gives you permission to be cruel?" Zalara felt tears threatening, but forced them back. She would not cry. She would not show that weakness, not even here. "I'm sorry, Mother. I'll apologize to the human delegation. I'll make a formal statement." "You will do far more than that," Queen Thisa said, her voice dropping to something more dangerous than anger disappointment. "But first, you will understand exactly what you did, exactly who you insulted." The queen moved to a cushioned bench beneath a window overlooking the city. She sat heavily, suddenly looking tired in a way Zalara had never seen before. For the first time, she noticed new lines around her mother's eyes, a slight dimming of her natural luminescence. "Sit," Queen Thisa commanded. Zalara sat on the bench opposite her mother, her hands folded in her lap. She felt like a child again, caught stealing sweets from the royal kitchens. 7 years ago, Queen Thisa began, her voice quieter now but no less intense. "Before you came of age, before you began attending these summits, I traveled to the frontier worlds on a diplomatic mission. Relations with the Outer Rim colonies had grown tense. They felt neglected by the core worlds, forgotten. There were whispers of rebellion." Zalara nodded. She vaguely remembered this. Her mother had been gone for nearly 2 months, an unusually long time. "The mission was supposed to be routine," Queen Thisa continued. "We met with colonial governors, toured settlements, listened to grievances. It was tedious work, but necessary. On the last world, a mining colony called Tariq IV, something went wrong." The queen's hands tightened on the armrests of her bench. Pirates. They had infiltrated the colony weeks before arrival, disguised as miners. They had been planning the attack for months, waiting for a target valuable enough to make the risk worthwhile. A Vindoran queen proved irresistible. Zelara felt cold dread settling in her stomach. She had known her mother's trip had been dangerous. There had been increased security protocols when she returned, but she had never heard the full story. They struck during a tour of the mining facilities, Queen Thesa said, her eyes distant with memory. Explosions, coordinated attacks, communications jammed. My personal guard fought bravely, but we were outnumbered and trapped underground. The pirates wanted hostages, leverage against Vinder. They were willing to kill anyone who stood in their way. She paused, drawing a deep breath. We retreated to a sealed section of the mines, but they were cutting through the doors. We had perhaps 20 minutes before they breached our position. My guard captain was dead. Half my security detail was dead. The survivors were wounded. I truly believed I would die there, in the darkness beneath a forgotten world. But you didn't, Zelara whispered. Because of the humans? Because of Marcus Webb, Queen Thesa corrected. Earth had a small delegation on Tariq 4 trade representatives, engineers helping with mining technology. When the attack began, they were on the surface. They could have evacuated, should have evacuated. They were civilians, Zelara. Not soldiers, not warriors. Just ordinary people trying to help a struggling colony. The Queen's expression softened slightly, though pain still lingered in her eyes. But they didn't evacuate. Marcus Webb, who was there as an engineering consultant, organized the other humans. They armed themselves with mining equipment and descended into hell itself to reach us. Zelara tried to imagine it. Ordinary people, civilians, choosing to run toward danger rather than away from it. It seemed incomprehensible. They fought their way through the pirates with mining lasers and improvised weapons. Queen Thesa continued. Marcus led them. I learned later that he had military experience from Earth's past conflicts, though he had left that life behind. But when the situation demanded it, he became a soldier again. The Queen stood and moved to the window, looking out over the glittering city. They reached us just as the pirates breached our final position. The fighting was brutal. Close quarters, no room for strategy, just desperate survival. Marcus personally put himself between me and 3 pirates. He was stabbed twice, shot once. He nearly died protecting a queen from a world he had barely heard of. Why? Zelara asked, genuinely confused. Why would he risk everything for someone he didn't know? Queen Thesa turned back to her daughter, and there was something almost pitying in her gaze. Because he could. Because it was right. Because he believes that those who can help have an obligation to those who need help, regardless of species or status or potential reward. She returned to her seat, leaning forward intently. While Marcus was recovering in the medical facility, I sat with him. I wanted to understand this human who had saved my life. We talked for hours. He told me about Earth, about his world's history. They are a young species by galactic standards, Zelara, but they have learned lessons in their short time that many ancient civilizations still haven't grasped. What lessons? Zelara asked, though she wasn't sure she wanted to hear the answer. That diversity is strength, not weakness. That cooperation achieves more than domination. That the measure of a civilization isn't in its technology or territory, but in how it treats those who are vulnerable. Queen Thesa's gaze hardened again. Lessons you clearly haven't learned, despite all your education and privilege. The words stung worse than any slap. Zelara looked down at her hands, at the rings adorning her fingers, each one worth more than most beings would earn in a lifetime. She had never questioned her wealth, her status, her right to look down on others. Marcus told me something else, Queen Thesa said softly. He said that on Earth, they have a concept called Noblesse oblige. It means that privilege comes with responsibility. Those who have much must do much. Those who are elevated must lift others up. She stood, moving to stand directly in front of her daughter. You are a princess of Vinder, Zalara. That title is not just about jewels and ceremonies, and the deference others show you. It is about duty, about being worthy of the trust our people place in us, about understanding that we serve them, not the other way around. Zalara felt the tears coming again, and this time couldn't stop them. They ran down her luminescent cheeks, leaving faint trails in the dim light. I didn't know, she whispered. I didn't understand? No, Queen Thessa agreed, though her voice had softened slightly. You didn't. But ignorance is not an excuse, especially for someone in your position. You have been sheltered, Zalara. I allowed it, thinking I was protecting you. Perhaps that was a mistake. The queen sat beside her daughter, close enough that their luminescence mingled. You humiliated Marcus in front of the entire galactic assembly. You mocked his appearance, his culture, his worth. And he stood there and took it with dignity because he is a better person than you gave him credit for. I'll apologize, Zalara said desperately. I'll do whatever it takes to make this right. You will, Queen Thessa agreed. But not yet. First, you need to truly understand what you're apologizing for. An apology without understanding is just empty words. She placed a hand on Zalara's shoulder, the first gentle gesture since this confrontation began. Tomorrow, you will go to the human quarters. You will speak with Marcus Webb, not as a princess performing a duty, but as one person trying to understand another. You will listen to him. You will learn about his world, his people, his experiences. And when you have begun to see him as an individual rather than a target for mockery, then you will apologize. Zalara nodded, wiping at her tears with the back of her hand. What if he refuses to see me? What if he doesn't want to speak with me after what I did? That is his right, Queen Thessa said simply. But Marcus is not a cruel person. If you approach him with genuine humility and a true desire to understand, I believe he will give you that chance. What you do with it will determine what kind of leader you become. The queen stood, her armor catching the light from the window. You are dismissed. I suggest you spend the evening reflecting on your actions. Tomorrow will be a long day. Zalara rose on unsteady legs. She moved toward the door, then paused. Mother? Yes? Thank you, Zalara said quietly, for stopping me. For not letting me continue being the person I was in that hall. Queen Thessa's expression softened almost imperceptibly. That is what mothers do, my daughter. They love their children enough to show them when they are wrong, even when it hurts both of them. Zalara left the receiving room and made her way through the palace corridors alone. She had dismissed Miss Tyla earlier with a gesture, needing solitude to process everything. The hall seemed different now, less glorious and more hollow. She passed servants and guards who bowed respectfully, and she found herself wondering about their lives, their thoughts, their worth beyond their service to her family dot in her private chambers. Zalara stood before a mirror, studying her reflection. The princess who looked back at her wore expensive jewels and fine clothing, had perfect luminescent skin and elegant horns. But there was something in her eyes, now a shadow of doubt, of shame, of nascent understanding dot. She thought of Marcus Webb standing silently while she mocked him, his green eyes steady and calm. She had thought his silence meant weakness. Now she understood it had been strength, the strength to endure cruelty with dignity, to refuse to lower himself to her level. Zalara removed her jewelry piece by piece, setting each item carefully on her dressing table. The sapphire chains, the diamond rings, the ceremonial crown. Without them, she looked younger, more vulnerable, more real. Tomorrow she would face the man she had wronged. She would try to understand him, to learn from him. And perhaps, if she was fortunate, she might begin to become worthy of the title she wore and the responsibility it carried. Outside her window, the twin moons of Vinder rose over the city, their light painting everything in shades of silver and blue. Somewhere in the diplomatic quarters, Marcus Webb was likely preparing for sleep, perhaps thinking about the day's events, perhaps not. Zelara wondered what it would be like to possess his calm, his certainty, his quiet strength. She had a long way to go. But for the first time in her life, she understood that the journey would be worth taking. The morning sun cast long shadows through the diplomatic quarters gardens as Princess Zelara made her way along the stone pathways. She had dressed simply today, a pale blue tunic and flowing pants, minimal jewelry, her hair pulled back in a practical braid. Mistela walked beside her, carrying a small package wrapped in silver cloth. "Are you certain about this, Your Highness?" Mistela asked for the third time that morning. "Perhaps you should send a formal written apology first, through proper channels." "No," Zelara said firmly, though her stomach churned with anxiety. "My mother was right. This needs to be personal, genuine, not another piece of political theater." They approached the human quarters, a modest building near the Eastern Gardens. It lacked the grandeur of other delegations' accommodations, no towering spires or holographic displays, just clean lines and functional architecture. Somehow, after yesterday, that simplicity seemed less like a failing and more like an honest reflection of who the humans were. 2 human security officers stood at the entrance. They recognized Zelara immediately, their expressions carefully neutral. One spoke quietly into a communication device, then nodded. "Ambassador Webb will see you in the gardens, Your Highness," the guard said, gesturing toward a path that wound through flowering trees. "He's by the meditation pool." Zelara thanked him, something she realized she rarely did with guards, and followed the indicated path. Mistela remained behind at a discreet distance, understanding that this conversation needed to happen privately. She found Marcus Webb sitting on a stone bench beside a circular pool where small fish darted through crystal-clear water. He wore casual clothing, dark pants, and a simple white shirt, and was reading from a handheld device. When he heard her approach, he stood, his movements economical and precise. "Your Highness," he said with a slight bow. His voice was neutral, revealing nothing. "Please, just Zelara," she said, her carefully rehearsed words suddenly seeming inadequate. "If you're willing." Marcus studied her for a moment, those green eyes seeming to see more than she was comfortable with. Then he gestured to the bench. "Would you like to sit?" They sat on opposite ends of the bench, an awkward space between them. Zelara clutched the silver-wrapped package in her lap, suddenly unsure how to begin. In her chambers last night, she had imagined this conversation 100 different ways. Now, facing him, all her planned words fled. "I owe you an apology," she finally said, forcing herself to meet his eyes. "What I did yesterday was inexcusable. I was cruel, arrogant, and ignorant. I judged you and your people based on superficial observations and my own prejudices. I'm deeply sorry." Marcus listened without interrupting, his expression thoughtful. When she finished, he was quiet for a moment, watching the fish swim lazy circles in the pool. "Thank you for saying that," he said eventually. "It takes courage to admit when we're wrong, especially in front of someone we've hurt." "My mother told me what you did," Zelara continued, the words spilling out now. "On Tarak 4, how you saved her life. How you risked everything for someone you barely knew." "Your mother is a remarkable woman," Marcus said, a slight smile touching his lips. "She makes decisions that actually help people, not just look good in history books. The galaxy needs more leaders like her." "I'm not like her," Zelara admitted, surprised by her own honesty. "I've spent my whole life concerned with appearances, with status, with maintaining my position in the social hierarchy. Yesterday showed me how shallow I've been. Marcus turned to face her more fully, his expression softening. You're young. We all make mistakes when we're young. The question is what we do after we realize we've made them. Is that wisdom from Earth? Zelara asked. That's wisdom from living, Marcus replied. Making a lot of mistakes myself, and hopefully learning from them. Zelara held out the silver-wrapped package. This is a small gesture, utterly insufficient, but it's traditional among my people when seeking genuine forgiveness. Marcus unwrapped it carefully, revealing a small crystalline sculpture. It depicted two hands clasped together, one clearly Vindoran with its luminescent quality, the other human with its plain simplicity. The craftsmanship was exquisite, each detail perfect. I had it commissioned overnight, Zelara explained. It represents what I hope we can achieve understanding between our peoples. Between us. It's beautiful, Marcus said, holding it up to catch the light. Thank you. This means more than you might think. They fell into silence again, but it felt less awkward now. A breeze rustled through the trees, carrying the scent of exotic flowers. Somewhere in the distance, alien birds sang melodies unlike anything heard on either of their worlds. Can I ask you something? Zelara said hesitantly. Yesterday, when I said all those terrible things, why didn't you respond? Why didn't you defend yourself or your people? Marcus considered the question, setting the sculpture carefully on the bench between them. Several reasons. First, engaging with you would have created a diplomatic incident. Your mother had worked hard to make this summit successful, and I wasn't going to jeopardize that because my ego was bruised. And second? Second, he said, meeting her eyes. I learned a long time ago that anger is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. You were trying to provoke a reaction. Giving you one would have meant you won. Zelara felt her cheeks flush with shame. That's remarkably mature. I don't think I could have shown that kind of restraint. Maybe not yet, Marcus said. But you came here this morning. That shows you're capable of growth, of changing. That's actually rarer than you might think, especially among people born to privilege. Tell me about Earth, Zelara said impulsively. Really tell me. Not the facts from diplomatic briefings, but what it's like. What matters to your people? Marcus smiled, a genuine expression that transformed his face from merely handsome to striking. That's a big question. What do you want to know? Everything, Zelara said, then laughed at herself. I'm sorry, that's too much. Start with, why did you leave Earth? Why come out here to the frontier? Marcus leaned back against the bench, his gaze turning distant. After my military service ended, I struggled to find purpose. I'd spent years fighting, and when the fighting stopped, I felt lost. Engineering gave me something to build rather than destroy. And the frontier? It's where people go to start over, to be part of something new. Do you miss it? Earth, every day, he admitted. The way rain smells on summer mornings. The ocean at sunset. Coffee from a specific cafe in Seattle that makes it perfectly. Small things mostly. But missing home doesn't mean I regret leaving. Both things can be true at once. Zelara found herself leaning forward, genuinely interested. We don't have oceans on Vinder. I've seen them in recordings, but they seem almost impossible. All that water, covering most of a planet? 70%, Marcus confirmed. Earth is mostly water. Some people say that's why we're so adaptable. We evolved learning to work with forces we couldn't control. The ocean doesn't care about your plans or your pride. It just is. You respect it, or it kills you. That sounds terrifying. It can be, Marcus agreed. But it's also beautiful, humbling. It reminds you that you're part of something much bigger than yourself. They talked for over an hour, the conversation flowing more easily as time passed. Marcus told her about Earth's diversity, its thousands of cultures, languages, and traditions. How humanity had nearly destroyed itself multiple times before learning to cooperate. How their rapid technological advancement came from necessity and desperation as much as ingenuity. Zelara, in turn, found herself sharing things she rarely discussed. Her fears about living up to her mother's legacy. The pressure of being constantly watched, judged, expected to be perfect. How lonely it could be at the top of the social hierarchy, surrounded by people who wanted something from you but never really knew you. That's part of why I was so awful yesterday, she confessed. Those people laughing at my jokes, they're not really my friends. They just want to be associated with royalty. I've never had anyone who saw me as just ... me. That's hard, Marcus said with genuine sympathy. Everyone needs at least one person who sees them as human or Vindoran, or whatever species. Someone who doesn't care about titles or status. Do you have that? I did, Marcus said, something sad flickering across his face. My team during the war. My family back on Earth. But out here, it's harder. People see the guy who saved a queen, the hero from the Tariq 4 incident. They don't see Marcus, who still has nightmares about the people he couldn't save. The vulnerability in his admission struck Zelara deeply. Here was someone who had every right to play the hero, to bask in admiration, but instead he spoke honestly about his struggles and fears. Thank you, she said softly, for sharing that, for trusting me with it, especially after yesterday. Marcus shrugged. Everyone's fighting battles no one else can see. I try to remember that before I judge them. The words hung between them, heavy with meaning. Zelara wondered if he was speaking about her, offering forgiveness without saying it directly. Would you ... She hesitated, then pushed forward. Would you show me more about Earth? Your culture, your art, your music? I want to understand. Really understand. Marcus looked surprised, then thoughtful. There's a human music festival tonight in the Cultural Quarter. Nothing formal, just Earth musicians who are part of the various delegations getting together to play. You'd be welcome to attend, if you don't mind sitting with common people instead of at a royal table. I think that's exactly what I need, Zelara said. They stood, and for a moment an awkward silence fell between them. Then Zelara extended her hand in the human gesture of greeting she had seen Marcus use with other diplomats. He took it, his hand warm and solid in hers. Thank you for coming here today, Zelara. Not Princess Zelara, not Her Highness. Just Zelara. It takes real strength to apologize. Thank you for giving me the chance, she replied, for not judging me solely on my worst moment. As she walked back through the gardens, Mistela fell into step beside her. The attendant looked curious but didn't pry. Sensing that something significant had happened, Zelara felt lighter than she had in years. The weight of maintaining her perfect Princess Facade had lifted slightly, revealing a person underneath who was flawed and uncertain, but maybe, just maybe, capable of becoming someone better. That evening, she returned to the diplomatic quarters wearing casual clothing that wouldn't draw attention. The music festival was held in an open courtyard with maybe 50 humans and a handful of curious aliens in attendance. Marcus saw her arrive and waved her over to where he sat with a group of his colleagues. The music was unlike anything Zelara had heard before. Guitars, drums, voices blending in harmonies that spoke of Earth's vast cultural tapestry. Some songs were upbeat and joyful, making people dance and clap. Others were slow and melancholic, telling stories of loss and longing and hope. During one particularly moving song about a soldier returning home, Zelara glanced at Marcus and saw tears on his cheeks. He didn't try to hide them or apologize for them. He simply felt the music, let it move him, She found herself crying too, though she wasn't entirely sure why. Perhaps for the beauty of it. Perhaps for the pain she had caused. Perhaps simply because for the first time in her life, she was experiencing something real and unfiltered by royal protocol. When the music ended and people began to disperse, Marcus walked her back toward the palace district. The twin moons hung heavy in the sky, painting everything silver. "Thank you for tonight," Zalara said, as they paused at the boundary between the diplomatic quarter and the royal district. "I've never experienced anything like that." "Music is humanity's way of saying things we can't put into words," Marcus replied. "Every culture on Earth has it. It's one of our few universal languages." They stood in comfortable silence, neither quite ready to say goodbye. Zalara felt something shifting inside her, a crack in the walls she had built around herself. This person she had dismissed so cruelly had shown her more genuine kindness in one day than most people in her life had shown in years. "Marcus," she said hesitantly, "what you said earlier about needing someone who sees you as just you, I think I need that too. And I think, maybe, we could be that for each other. Friends who see past the titles and expectations." Marcus smiled, and in the moonlight, his eyes seemed to hold entire galaxies. "I'd like that, Zalara. I'd like that very much." As she walked back to her chambers, Zalara realized something that both thrilled and terrified her. Somewhere in the space of a single day, her feelings toward Marcus Webb had transformed from contempt to respect to something she couldn't quite name yet. Something warm and uncertain and completely unexpected. She touched her fingers to her lips, remembering the feeling of his hand in hers. Just friendship, she told herself firmly. That's all it could be. A princess and a common human, the complications would be impossible. But as she lay in bed that night, replaying their conversations in her mind, she couldn't quite convince herself that friendship was all she wanted. And that realization changed everything.